to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who just ordered way too much shrimp. It's Chris Kelly.
Yeah, hello everybody.
That was a lot of shrimp, Chris Kelly.
Yeah, the ocean just called and they've run out of shrimp.
So there's a scene in this movie, Liquid Sky, where there's a doctor, Dr. Johan and Sylvia, they're in a house and they're going to spy on some people across the next building, and she orders some dinner. And she just proceeds to order jumbo shrimp, coconut shrimp, fried shrimp. I mean, she goes full Bubba before Bubba in this film. And shrimp's not cheap. So she ordered a ton of shrimp in this.
For two people, there was an astronomical amount of shrimp, I have to admit.
Now, I don't know, you did a lot of research into this film, and I know you did some interviews and you listened to the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray that you got from our good friends, Videodrome. Our good friends there who are doing carry-out movies, which is amazing right now. I listened to an interview with Slava Zuckerman, the director, and they're like, what's with the shrimp? He's like, well, I knew someone who did that, so I just threw it in. So a shrimp lover.
I didn't come across much with the shrimp, but a lot of this film was pulled from real life, and different characters that are written into the movie are pulled from their actual lives. Slava Zuckerman, Nina Karov, and Anne Carlisle.
I read about that. They all sort of lived together for a while, and then they wrote this film because he had come over from Russia. He had some movies lined up. He was going to do a movie with Andy Warhol. He was going to do a movie about a guy who makes his 16-year-old girl, his daughter dies. He turns her into like a robot, and she's 16 for the rest of her life. And then his wife was working on a screenplay about a woman who just can't have orgasms. So then that whole idea, and then they brought in Anne Carlisle, and that formed into Liquid Sky.
Correct. Yeah, it was a lot of it was the original idea was from Slava Zuckerman, who had come up with a movie with UFOs coming to America and a new wave model. From my interview that I had with Anne Carlisle, she said that she was a new wave model. Slava had written a screenplay out, and then they decided to turn it into practice. Then this is what we have, is the movie.
It's interesting how this came about. I mean, it had a $500,000 budget, and I guess they did a lot of their shopping at thrift stores, but it became quite an iconic look. I mean, a famous store called Liquid Sky opened in New York. That was like the very trendy store where Chloe Sevigny worked, like very trendy type stuff. And he said a year later at Bloomingdale's they saw these kind of outfits. So this was quite, I mean, at least in that scene, it was pretty influential in New York in the 80s.
It was. When I spoke with Anne, she said that it was very much of the time that new wave modeling was taking over in New York. And as she put it, that the models were then of the people that you would see at the clubs, that they became the canvases. That's what Slava wanted to focus on, was that story with an alien invasion. And he compared this movie to was Sleeping Beauty. And he said that the character of Margaret is looking for her Prince Charming. But she doesn't find a Prince Charming on Earth. She finds them with the aliens.
Yeah, on Earth she finds a cocaine dealer. She finds a soap actor. She finds a lecherous teacher. She finds a druggie that's squirrely. She doesn't have good luck in this. It's a long day for her in this. So when I watched this film, right, I knew nothing about it. You're like, Mark, watch this movie. So I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. I trust Chris Kelly. I don't anymore. But I watched it and I was like, what is happening? It's a very disorienting. The vibe is off. It's a very unique film. It's a cult film. And I was kind of worried because when I found out that a guy directed it, I'm like, oh, this is like, I just wasn't into it. Like, I'm like, what is this guy doing? But then I found out about his wife, and Anne wrote it, and they were a big part of this, and it made me feel a little bit better about it. But before we get further into this, I know, how long is that? So, all right, there's a scene in this where, Adrian, where she sings Rhythm Box. How long is that? Because she starts it. And then Jimmy and Margaret, both played by Anne Carlisle, go to her apartment and they're hunting down cocaine, trying to get cocaine. They're there, they're back. She locks herself in a room. They're there for a while. Then they come back. Then they're hanging out for a while, and she's still performing that. Is it like a performance piece, like a poem, like slam poetry that goes 45 minutes? Or, I mean, how long is, could you say interested in that song for that long?
I don't think so. I mean, that's about a good solid 30, 40 minutes, I would imagine.
At least,
and like,
right?
After a while, you're like, whoa, hey, Adrian, can we put on Rapper's Delight for a minute just to bring the vibe up?
Like that's a long. I didn't see any water in her hand, and she's wearing ear warmers backwards on her forehead in this movie. At least that's the vibe I got. You know those things that you put behind your head to go wrap around your ears when it's cold?
Yeah.
She wore that over her forehead.
Well, it was of the time, Mark.
No, I'm not hating on it. It's a very interesting choice. Like I was like, I've never thought about doing that. Maybe I should.
And now, Mark,
maybe I am now.
You are. That explains why your forehead is so warm.
All right, Chris Kelly, in a nutshell. Not in a nutshell. I don't know why I said that. Don't lie. Oh wait, no, you don't have to lie either. No, I don't know why I said that. Do me a favor. I'm pulling in jokes with myself that the audience has no idea. That's bad. So what I want you to do is sum up this movie in 240 words or less.
Oof, I wasn't expecting to be put on that kind of pressure. Let me see if I can do it.
Flop sweat. Chris Kelly, I see sweat coming through.
The sweat is coming through your computer right now because of me. I'm sweatier than Carl Weathers in Predator. I would say that aliens come to Earth to infiltrate the modeling industry in early 80s New York City, only to fall in love with Margaret and test her strength.
Really? I thought it was. That's interesting. That's a unique look at it. Is that the look at it? Is that the way they explained her? Is that the way you interpreted it?
That's the way I interpreted it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it seems like they've taken a liking to her right off the bat. Because they come to Earth, they see her through her window, they see Margaret through her window, and they immediately are infatuated with her. Every person that she becomes in contact with and they have an orgasm, they are killed, leaving her to have utter dependence on them. And that's what we see at the end, very much she climbs the top of the roof and she's professing her love to them, and they beam her up to their ship.
With a ton of heroin in her system.
With a blast of heroin.
See, I thought they were just kind of following her around because they're like, well, bad things happen where she goes and we can play, because they land in places where heroin is plentiful, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
And then they also kind of get that rush through other people's orgasms. So she's going around, and a lot of her situations, they really like, it's tough. I don't want, like, it's tough to talk about because she just goes around and essentially gets, well, no, she does. She gets raped a couple times, and then like some guys kind of use too much influence. They push themselves on her. So she never has an orgasm, but these guys do. So then they die. So like, and then that scene with Jimmy, and then the scene with Adrian, they disappear. So I was wondering if, since this is all forced on her and she never has that, then she's safe because she is not doing what all the 5 other characters did.
That's fair, yeah.
And then she becomes like an avenging angel, right? When she goes after the soap guy.
Yeah.
What a sneaky trick. She goes up to him and she does all this dancing for him. He's like, hey, you want to get out of here? And then he tries to give her Quaaludes.
And then he uses the age-old thing, well, my dad's in pictures. I can put you in pictures. And she's like, yeah, you think that's going to do anything for me? So I thought that was pretty cool to put that line in there.
I love that she really cusses him out too. She gives it to him.
She's a tough woman in this movie. I thought her character is very strong and empowering, and she doesn't take shit from other people, which I liked a lot.
I mean, she kind of does at the end, right? When she's like, oh, it doesn't matter what I do, just do it.
Yeah, more or less. At the end, it's like she's giving up, but it's almost like she has utter feelings for the aliens at this point. She knows what's going on, and then she's professing her love to the aliens.
When you talk to Anne, like, so this scene, like, I'm sure that she had seen this kind of thing in New York, and maybe Slava had too, where, we talk about this in Bowfinger with Heather Graham's character, but they go to, like people from a smaller city. So she's a WASP from, I don't want to use a lot of the words they use in this movie, but she's a WASP from Connecticut that came down and what's up?
I'm sorry. I was going to say that speech was written by Slava, and said either the day of or the day before they shot that scene. But Anne had taken Slava and Nina up to Connecticut where Anne was from and showed them around, and Slava compiled that whole speech based on their interactions. Yeah.
That's cool.
So she said it was like she was telling her whole story about why she's in New York City.
Well, and then she kind of does that. Oh yeah, and then the speech that she makes at the end about being like Bowie.
Yeah, that whole thing it was written from that.
Oh wow! I mean,
from her whole life.
And her friends are terrible, by the way.
Yeah, they're not. They're a lot of jerks.
Do it,
Jimmy. Jimmy, who plays the other model, he was originally supposed to be played by another person, but according to Anne, the guy never showed up. So prior prior to them shooting this, they were scouting for locations, and they were doing the nightclub scene, and they were at an actual nightclub. And Slava said, "Well, why don't you dress as a man and try to pick up a lady here?" And Anne said, "Sure, I'll do it. Why not?" So she dressed up very much similar to the character of Jimmy, and she said she went to the club and she picked up a woman almost immediately. And I said, "Wow, like that's insane. Did it just work?" And she said, "Yeah." She said it was really easy just to go pick up a woman. She said afterwards, she apologized and said, "Look, I'm actually a woman and I'm doing this as a part movie. No hard feelings." And she said everything was cool. But she said Slava said that was what he needed for her to know that she could play Jimmy.
Oh.
And it's pretty wild to think about because the visual effects at the time in 1982 was not exactly top notch, but you can't really tell that it's being played by the same person. At least I couldn't the first time. I mean, the first time I saw this movie, I knew that there was something off, but I didn't realize that they were the same person. But she explained it all to me that, they had the tennis ball on a stick, and then that was used for the eye line, and that they recorded that, and then so on and so on. And it's really interesting how they put all this together just simply because the guy didn't show up.
I bet Slava was cursing this guy too, because it gave them a lot of extra work to do
Yeah,
as well.
I would imagine it wasn't exactly the easiest. But since Anne had already written it out, she said it wasn't hard for her to do because she had based all the characters on people that she had known. She wrote it. So it's not like it would have been hard for her to memorize the lines or know how they were supposed to behave or act.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes this movie so unique, I guess, and that's why it still has such an audience, and Vinegar Syndrome bought it back. I mean, it's an interesting film. And I was reading, I'm gonna switch things here a little bit, but the score in this, I was reading a review for it, and they said the score is almost invasive of the film.
Yeah.
But it is. And Mondo put out a limited edition vinyl treatment of it. I mean, this is a cherished score. And Slava, how he started doing this score? Do you know the behind the scenes story about that?
No, I don't.
Well, there was this place that they had the synthesizers, but it was only at their studio. So they were having people come there and they were teaching people how to use them. So he would go there and for very cheap, he produced a score on these machines that people were trying to get people trained on and to use. So he kind of snuck in there and made that happen, which I think is a pretty funny story.
So he kind of just went in there with intentions of being like, "Oh, well, I'll just learn how to do this." But then he was actually putting together the score.
Yeah. He's like plonk, 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 plonk. And the thing is, have you listened to the score without the film?
I have. It's actually for streaming on Spotify.
Yeah. How does it hold up? Like just listening to it.
It's very well. A lot of the songs are short. I mean, it's a score, so there's not like a lot of long songs, but it sounds eerie in your house if you're just sitting here by yourself, like cooking dinner, and then you play it. It doesn't sound. It doesn't work. I don't know. My personal opinion is it's a very unique sound. It sounds a lot like a certain ratio with band Suicide. If you know those bands of that, they all came out around the same time as the early '80s, but they all had that certain sound to it, which was slightly strange but haunting at the same time, but you could still kind of dance to it.
Yeah, I mean, when Margaret dances for the soap actor, like she busts out some interesting moves, and at the club they found some like I know a lot of these were club people, they were scene folks at the time, and it was pretty interesting what Slava said. Since he was an immigrant, he always kind of felt like an outsider. As he said, he was like, I'm a Jewish man, so I always felt out of place wherever I was. So I think he felt really comfortable with this scene. Like the way they portray this scene is in no way really judgmental. And these are kind of the outsiders that he felt comfortable with. So so I thought that was a pretty interesting thing. But the extras in this, they were dancing pretty good to this music.
Yeah, well, they were dancing very much of the time. They were moving to it, and a lot of those people were just club goers. They were there for the actual club. One of the things that was interesting